Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever feel like your chronic pain just won't budge no matter what you try? You are not alone. It's a huge problem, and finding the right treatment can feel like looking for a needle in a haystack. Today we're diving into some fascinating new research that is exploring a totally different way to tackle chronic pain, and maybe even other complex problems we face in our minds. It's all about using your own personal data to create a treatment plan that's built just for you. So, the big question this study is trying to answer is this: can we get better at treating complex problems like chronic pain by really looking at each person as a unique individual, using their own specific information? Right now, treatments are often designed for groups, and while they work for many, they don't work for everyone. Therapists often rely on their best guess and past experience, but what if we could use technology and data to make those guesses much smarter and more tailored? The researchers brought in 12 people dealing with chronic pain and 9 therapists who would be helping them. They used a special type of study design called a single-case experimental design. Think of it like this: each person gets their own mini experiment. They collect a lot of information about them before starting any new treatment. Then they try out a new approach. And then they collect even more information to see if anything changed. They even randomize the baseline periods, which is a fancy way of saying they mixed up when each person started their treatment to make sure the results weren't just a fluke. They asked participants to keep track of their feelings and experiences 6 times a day for about 3 weeks using an app on their smartphones. This is called Ecological Momentary Assessment, or EMA. It's like a super detailed diary of your daily life. Then, using all this data, they built a person-specific network. Imagine this network like a map showing how different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are connected for each individual. For example, maybe feeling sad is strongly connected to not wanting to move, which then makes the pain feel worse. The network helps pinpoint the key connections that are causing the most trouble for that specific person. It sounds like a lot of data collection, and it was on average, each person provided almost 300 data points. The good news is that most participants stuck with it, with 7 out of 12 reaching a great compliance rate of 80% or more throughout the study. This suggests that this intensive tracking can be done in real life. Therapists also found the data visualizations helpful. When they asked participants and therapists what they thought, the feedback was quite positive. People felt the process was participant-centered, meaning it really focused on their individual experience. The data visualizations helped them understand how things were connected and supported therapeutic reflection. It made the therapy feel more focused and data-driven, rather than just based on intuition. The key takeaways from what made this work were consistent self-monitoring, just regularly checking in with yourself through the app, and structured data-informed reflection. This means both the patient and therapist looked at the collected data together and used it to think deeply about what was happening. This process helped people become more aware of their daily patterns and supported deeper thinking during therapy sessions. Now, for the actual treatment effects, when they looked at each person individually, the results were a bit mixed. Some people got better, some didn't see as much change, and some even seemed to get a little worse in certain areas. This is common in this kind of early research. However, when they looked at everyone together using a statistical method that combines all the data, they found an average decrease in disability scores. This means that overall, across the group, people felt less disabled by their pain after the intervention. The p-value of 0.03 is important. Here it's like a fluke-o-meter. A low number like this suggests the result is unlikely to be just random chance. Scroll conclusions: the clinical value of data. Informed personalization may not lie in algorithmic precision alone, but rather in its ability to facilitate patient-centered, reflective clinical reasoning in complex cases. Conclusion: so, what does this all mean? The study suggests that the real power of this data-driven approach might not be just in using complex computer algorithms to tell you exactly what to do. Instead, it is more about how this entire process, the detailed tracking, the visualization, the data-informed discussions helps patients and therapists think together in a more focused, reflective, and personalized way. It helps them understand the unique complexities of each individual's pain experience. When people talked about their experience, they often described point pain as a helpful structure. Therapists liked using the visualizations to explain things and guide treatment. Patients appreciated that decisions were based on their actual experiences, not just a therapist's hunch. It gave them a clearer picture of what was going on. The data really helped keep therapy on track. Therapists used the network maps and charts to talk about why they were suggesting certain things, and patients felt reassured that the plan was based on solid evidence from their own lives. These visualizations became a starting point for really important conversations. Instead of just talking generally about pain, they could look at the data and discuss specific connections and targets for treatment. And it wasn't just in session. Many patients really got into checking their own data through the app between appointments, which is a great sign of engagement. Both patients and therapists reported positive changes. People felt they understood their pain better, became more self-aware, and learned real strategies to cope. Some even found benefits from modules focusing on personal values or self-compassion. It wasn't just about reducing pain, it was about improving overall functioning and learning how to manage the emotional toll of chronic pain. But it is important to note that some people did experience a burden from all the repeated assessments reminding them of their pain daily. And for a few, they didn't feel much change. Therapists found that this approach helped them be more structured and goal-oriented. They learned to define clear targets and track progress systematically. Common therapeutic factors like the relationship with the therapist were still super important, but the study really highlighted the power of that repeated self-observation and getting personalized feedback. This combination seemed to be a key ingredient. By seeing their own patterns, people could develop new ways of understanding and responding to their pain. Therapists found that having clear goals and sticking to the plan informed by the data was very effective. It is also worth mentioning that sometimes, even with all this data, it could be tricky to pinpoint exactly why a change happened. This is a common challenge in complex therapy research. Overall, making this work in the real world involved a lot of factors. For patients, it was easier when the technology was simple, the language was clear, and their concerns were addressed. Therapists really benefited from specific training on the app and the network analysis, plus ongoing support. The key to making this accessible seems to be keeping it user-friendly and making sure everyone understands what's going on. Let's look at a bit more data. As we saw, they collected a massive amount of information. And overall, most people did a good job of keeping up with the assessments. When they dug into the individual results, they used a few different statistical tools to try and measure the impact. These are fancy ways of looking for consistent changes over time. Looking at this table shows us the individual results. For example, for patient number 1, their target item was pain intensity, and they were in the attention control module. You can see their average pain intensity score decreased from about 1.60 during the baseline phase to 0.81 during the intervention. Other patients had different target items and modules, and the outcomes varied. When they analyzed the group data concerning disability, they found that on average, disability scores went down by about 0.45 points. Again, that p-value of 0.03 suggests this change is statistically significant and not just random. This figure visually shows how disability scores, pain self-efficacy, and other measures changed over time for the group. You can see a general trend towards improvement in some areas. So the bigger picture here is that this study is a proof of concept. It shows that combining detailed daily tracking, network analysis, and a structured way to choose treatments can be feasible and accepted by patients and therapists. The current system for treating mental health issues often relies on diagnosing a condition and then picking a standard treatment. While this is useful, it doesn't always capture the unique way each person experiences their problem. This study really dug into how to bridge that gap between what we know from research and what happens in real therapy sessions. They looked at how to understand a patient's problems beyond just a diagnosis, how to blend patient goals with data, and how to pick the right treatment. The observing part, which is the EMA and self-monitoring, was crucial. Participants found that collecting data 6 times a day could be a bit much, but when they collected it less often, it felt less relevant. This suggests there is a sweet spot for how often we should be checking in. What's really interesting is that this tracking wasn't just passive data collection. It actually became a part of the therapy itself, helping people notice patterns and think more deeply about their experiences. The deciding part, where they used the network analysis to pick a treatment target, was also key. Therapists found the supervision sessions where they discussed the data really valuable for making informed decisions. This is a really important point. The researchers believe the network analysis isn't just about precise math. It is more about giving therapists and patients a shared language to talk about how different parts of their experience connect. This can lead to much better collaboration in understanding their problems. The intervening part, the actual therapy, was delivered in a structured way. While this helped with learning and focus, some participants felt it could be less flexible. Getting weekly feedback on how they were doing in the single case design was also reported as helpful, though sometimes therapists wished for even clearer guidance on how to use that information. Now, like any study, this one has its strengths and limitations. A big strength is its ecological validity, meaning it was done in a real-world clinical setting with real patients and therapists. This makes the findings more relevant to everyday practice. However, there were a few limitations. The study design had some areas where bias could have been a concern, and they didn't have strict replication of treatment effects, meaning it's hard to say for sure that the intervention caused the changes. Also, some researchers were also therapists, which could have influenced things. Another limitation is that it is hard to tell exactly which part of this whole system, the tracking, the networks, the decision-making, or the evaluation was the most important. It is likely the combination of all of them. Because this study focused so heavily on individual data, it's tricky to make broad statements that apply to everyone. What works for one person might not work for another. And that is the whole point, but it makes it harder to generalize the findings to large groups. Scroll clinical implications to conclusion. So, what are the real-world implications of this? This research suggests that personalized therapy isn't just about using fancy new tools. It's about creating a continuous loop of observing what's happening, making thoughtful decisions based on that data, and then intervening. This process can help both therapists and patients become more aware, structure their thinking, and build a shared understanding of the therapy. The core message is that the real value of this data-informed approach is in fostering awareness, helping people reflect, and building a better shared understanding of the therapeutic journey. It's about making therapy more collaborative and grounded in the individual's lived experience. This is just the beginning, of course. Future research could look at larger groups of people, refine the methodologies, and explore how to make these personalized approaches even more efficient and flexible for everyday clinical practice. A big thank you to the researchers and everyone involved in this study for pushing the boundaries of how we think about treating complex psychological issues. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a like. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply, and let me know in the comments what other research topics you'd like us to explore. See you next time!